All right, Poetic Books, this is the final week, week number 8 of Poetic Books. So if you've made it this far, congratulations, you're just about done. But I wanted to give some concluding thoughts for the book of Ecclesiastes and the book of Song of Solomon. So be prepared, get ready, locked in. It's going to be a long video. No, it really won't be, but I just wanted to supplement Dr. Christmas's course material. So first, wanted to cover the book of Ecclesiastes. So it's a book that contains a lot of wisdom. In fact, of course, the Bible is going to contain a lot of wisdom, but it can be said, especially these poetic books, are going to contain a lot of wisdom, both in sayings like individual proverbs, psalms, and just using the poetic device lends itself to showing you wisdom in a particular or a creative way or fashion. So Ecclesiastes, as Dr. Christmas points out, the theme of that book being vanity, it's more about the idea that God is the only real certainty that we can really rely on, rather than the things of the world. So that's the purpose of Solomon listing all these things, work, riches, gaining wealth, gaining wives, whatever you can throw out there that would have been considered profitable or good, even back in the ancient world or today. Really, those things in and of themselves, by themselves, or even taken together, without God, just end up being vain. There's no certainty to it. There's no guarantee that your life will extend. In fact, there's a guarantee, unless God intervenes, there's a guarantee that one day you will pass away. Your life doesn't go on in this world forever. Eventually you'll die, whether you live to be 70, 80, 90, 100, whatever. Your riches, no matter how many millions and even billions of dollars you can possibly accumulate, eventually you'll die and you can't take that money with you. It goes to your children or to charities or both or whatever. So only God is the only constant that is guaranteed to last. You can't lose Him. He's the one that stays with you. He's the one that, when we say we believe in a resurrection, it's because God's the one doing it, not us. So God's the certainty that we can rely on. And then there's Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, and I want to read that for you. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So I can't stress enough that everything can be summed up in that. Fear God and keep His commandments. So even though we're free from the bonds of the law, so the law brings death, we still have a moral duty to God. Fearing God, that is, a reverential awe, respect, and reverence for His power, position, and authority, that fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And you may have heard that before in the book of Proverbs. So a lack of fear of God, it's like someone who lives as though he's indifferent to what God asks of him. Can you think of anyone you know right now that may be like that? I know I can. You can think of people who, friends, family, co-workers, just different people. In fact, if we're being really honest, really introspective with ourselves, we can probably think of times where we have been more or less indifferent to what God asks of us, even after salvation. There may be occasional brief times where we catch ourselves not really being attuned to what God's asking of us, or not really being in a state of caring a whole lot. And then God uses His Spirit to convict us and bring us about. But we've got to fear God, have that reverential awe for who He is in His power, position, and authority. And I think Dr. Christmas has a lot to say that's really good about the book of Ecclesiastes. So I wanted to move on for just a minute and tackle Song of Solomon. So this won't be graphic by any means. We're going to be, respectful of everyone, but we are going to talk about the Bible, because it is a book of the Bible. It's not just some ad notes, written on for fun or something. But if we believe Christianity and the Bible speaks to every area of life and how we should live it, then it's going to speak for marriage and a sexual ethic as well. So sex pervades our society, and we've tried everything to kind of combat that. We've tried abstinence programs, marriage retreats, books, literature. Sometimes it works for some people, and many times it doesn't. So why might this be? Well, I think, I'm not the first one to come up with this the way I'm going to describe it, but I think it's important that we examine it. There are two extremes. So on the one hand, you've got the very conservative view, and that very conservative view is that sex is primarily or even only for procreative purposes. On the other hand, we have the view that sex is primarily or even only about you. It's about what you're going to get out of it. It's about how you can satisfy your own desires. So over here is almost like where it's a necessary evil for procreative purposes. Over here, you have a situation where it's about you. It's all about your needs. Well, abstinence programs tend to retain this individualistic message. It's all about you. It's going to be great once you get married. Just wait and see how good it is for you. And so we've unconsciously, in a lot of these abstinence programs, we've unconsciously pushed this idea that that sex is created to be mostly about you and what you want and your pleasure and your desires. This is a potentially false expectation. So it's not always, it's not always whatever people imagine it's going to be. But more than that, and more importantly than that, it's a false view. It retains the idea that sex is about what you can get out of it. Instead, there's a hybrid view of this procreative purpose and this all about you purpose, something that's more balanced and in between, that is far more biblical. Yes, it's about procreation, but it's about an intimate knowledge and joining together of man and wife for mutual benefit. So if we're going to have a good sexual ethic, we need to think rightly about it. And the way to think rightly about it is to see what the scriptures say about it. And we're not going to go through a giant study. I encourage you, there are good books. There are books on the poetic books and wisdom books that Dr. Christmas lists in the syllabus for additional bibliography, so I would definitely refer you to that. But just try to think rightly about it, where you see God creates man, and in chapter 2, he says, for this cause, Genesis chapter 2, he says, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. It's all about that intimate relationship between man and wife. It's no longer about, when you get married, as in all things, when you get married, you seek to please your spouse. So you seek to please God overall, but it's no longer about you. It's about serving your spouse. Husbands, serve your wives. Wives, serve your husbands. And Ephesians even talks about submitting to each other, one to another, both in love, in word, in deed, in actions. And so this pervades all facets of marriage, including a sexual ethic. So when we start to think rightly about things, about gifts, about the ways that God has set up the human race to behave and to operate, it's then that we're going to have a stronger view of marriage and a stronger sexual ethic that's no longer focusing on us. It's about us saying, God, let me submit to your will and let me submit to serving others. So I want you to think about that this week, this final week of Poetic Books. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Any comments on this video here on YouTube, feel free to leave them. And this class has been great. I really look forward to seeing you in other classes and hope that you do well in all that you endeavor to do for the Lord.